Are there any questions? This is an offer that usually comes at the end of classroom lectures and long meetings. Ask when an audience is usually not only overdosed on information, but there's not any time left for questions anyway. Because at times like this, usually the only questions you have are, can we leave now? And where can we get something to eat? The gesture is supposed to indicate openness on the part of the speaker, I think. And if in fact some earnest fool does ask a question, it's almost always answered by repeating something the speaker has already said. But in 1972, the wonderful Unitarian minister Robert Fulghum wrote this little essay. He tells the story about when he was young and earnest, and he had a habit of, if there was a little time left at the end of a lecture or a meeting and the offer was made, he would ask the most important question of all. What is the meaning of life? You never know. I mean, somebody may have the answer and he didn't want to miss it because he was too intimidated to ask. But when he asked, the group usually laughed and shuffled and took it as a joke and started to pick up their things and leave on that ridiculous note. But once, and only once, he asked that question and he got a serious answer. Now, he says that where and when this incident took place is important because it had a power of its own. It was near the village of Gonia on a rocky bay on the island of Crete, where there was an institute dedicated to human understanding and peace, and especially to reconciliation between Germans and Cretans. An improbable task given the bitter residue of what happened there during World War II. The site is important because it overlooks a small airstrip where the Nazi paratroopers landed on Crete when they invaded, and they were attacked by peasants whose only weapons were hay knives and hay scythes, and the retribution was terrible. The populations of whole villages were lined up and shot for assaulting Hitler's finest troops. Hate was the only weapon the Cretans had at the end, and it was a weapon that many declared they would never, ever give up. High above this institute is a cemetery with a single cross marking the mass graves of those Cretan peasants. And across the bay on another hill is the regimented burial ground of the Nazi paratroopers. The memorials are so placed so that anyone can see and never forget. Against this heavy curtain of history, and in this place where the stone of hatred was hard and thick, the existence of an institute devoted to healing the wounds of war was a fragile paradox. How did it come to be there? The answer is a man, Christos Papaderos, a doctor of philosophy, a politician, a resident of Athens, but a son of this soil. And at war's end, he came to believe that the Germans and the Cretans had much to teach each other, much to give each other, much to learn from one another. They had an example to set. For if they could forgive each other and construct a creative relationship, then any people could. To make a lovely story short, Papaderos succeeded, and the Institute became a reality. Many books were written on the dreams that were realized by what people gave to people in that place. And by the time Fulghum came to the Institute for a summer session in the 70s, Christos Papaderos had become a living legend. One look at him and you saw his strength and his intensity, his energy and courage and intelligence radiated from his person. And to shake his hand, Fulgham said, to be in a room where he spoke, was to experience his extraordinary humanity. Few men live up to their reputations when you get close, but Christos Papaderos was an exception. At the last session of the last morning of a 2-week seminar on Greek culture led by intellectuals and experts, Dr. Papaderos rose from his chair at the back of the room and he walked to the front where he stood in the bright Greek sunlight of an open window and he looked out. He turned and made the ritual gesture. Are there any questions? Quiet quilted the room. No questions, said Papaderos. So, Fulgham asked, Dr. Papaderos, what is the meaning of life? Usual laughter followed and people stirred to go, but Papaderos held up his hand and he stilled the room and he looked at Fulgham and for a long time asking with his eyes if this fellow was serious, and seeing from Fulgham's eyes that he was. I will answer that question. And taking his wallet out of his hip pocket, he fished into a leather fold and he brought out a very small, round mirror, about the size of a quarter. And what he said went like this. During the war, when I was a small child in a remote village, I was on the road one day and I found a broken piece of a mirror where a German motorcycle had been wrecked. I tried to find all the pieces and put them together, but it wasn't possible. So I kept the largest piece, this one. And by sharpening it on a stone, I was able to turn it into a circle. And I began to play with it as a toy, and I became fascinated by the fact that I could reflect light into dark places where the sun would never shine, into deep holes and dark closets. And as a boy, it became a game for me to get light into the most inaccessible places I could find. I kept the little mirror, and as I went about my growing up, I would take it out in idle moments and continue the challenge of the game. As I became a man, I grew to understand that this was not just a child's game, but a metaphor for what I might do with my life. I came to understand that I am not the light or the source of the light, but light, meaning truth and understanding and love, is there, but it will only shine in many dark places if I reflect it. I am a fragment of a mirror whose whole design and shape I do not know, but nevertheless, with what I have, I can reflect light into the dark places of this world, into the black places in the hearts of men and women, and change some things sometimes. Perhaps others may see and do likewise. This is what I am about. This is the meaning of my life. Then he took his small mirror and holding it carefully, he caught the bright rays of daylight streaming through the window and reflected them onto Fulgham's face and onto his hands lying there on the desk. Much of what Fulgham experienced in the way of information about Greek culture and history that summer is gone from his memory. But in the wallet of his mind, he still carries a small, round mirror. Are there any questions? Do you know the Greek word arete? It's a term from ancient Greece, It's usually translated as virtue or excellence, but it actually means something closer to being the best you can be, or perhaps reaching your highest potential. Now, I chose to share that wonderful Fulgham essay because it describes Christos Papaderos as a man of surpassing arete. This word, arete, is not well known in our culture, and I regret that because I've always found it to be a useful and helpful term in trying to understand ourselves and the world around us. Now, arete applies to objects and animals, as well as to human beings. The arete of a knife is sharpness. The arete of a racehorse is speed. The racehorse is different from the plow horse because the plow horse's arete is strength. Now, the proof of true arete is effectiveness. The arete of a human being, of course, is much more complicated. Homer applied the term to both Greek and Trojan heroes in his great epics. Male heroes, of course, but female heroes also. The loving mother is equal in honor to the brave warrior in those Homeric poems. The man or woman with arete is a person who uses all of their faculties to achieve high results. The Homeric hero or heroine who is true to their arete is moved by a sense of duty. But it's not duty as we usually understand it. It means duty to oneself, towards one's destiny, toward performing that task in life that's been assigned to each individual by the universe, and doing it with excellence. This was the very definition of happiness for the ancient Greeks. The Hindu Bhagavad Gita makes the same point. A truly meaningful life is only achieved when you willingly and wholeheartedly achieve the destiny that has been assigned you. The Buddhist concept of Dharma contains the same principle. Like Fulgham, I've always wondered about the meaning of life and what is required to have a meaningful life. What's, for me, which meant the same as a happy life. Those Greek and Hindu and Buddhist definitions took my breath away. They seemed so much more correct than what my American culture offered me, which seemed to be total instant gratification of all possible desires. I have given this a great deal of thought, and of course I've wondered about my own highest and best use. And over time I learned that one of the easiest ways to figure out what your destiny is to follow your bliss. Thank you, Joseph Campbell. So in following my bliss, I eventually wound up with a career in ministry. And because in ministry I can, it seems, offer others what I wanted, which was a path and a little light to see by. So ministry became my career and has given me the best expression of my purpose in life. I truly didn't pick that destiny. Ministry always sounded like a funny, odd thing for me, but by following the things I really loved in life, it fell upon me, because that's how it happens sometimes. You know, sometimes just learning how to love well is the task. Mother Teresa used to say that all the time. It doesn't have to be anything big in a global sense or even a local sense, only in a personal sense. Gandhi reminded us, whatever you do, It will probably be insignificant, but you must do it as well as you can. I'm going to give you one more story. Now, this one is from a movie, a Billy Crystal movie called City Slickers. Like me, it's old. In City Slickers, Billy and his two buddies, who are all three suffering urban middle life crisis, decide to sign on to a 2-week cattle drive in Montana. And there they meet Curly, a wind-roughened, sun-baked, leather-skinned cowboy who is played perfectly by Jack Palance. Now, Curly keeps mostly to himself. He doesn't say much. And when he does speak, it's frightening, but wise. He's like Yoda on a horse, only more intimidating. But one afternoon on the drive, Billy Crystal's goofy character rides alongside the tough cowboy and he asks, "Hi, Curly, killed anybody today?" Curly turns a flinty smile and says, "Day ain't over yet." Near the end of the cattle drive, Crystal dares to ask Curly that crucial question. What is the meaning of life? Curly holds up his gloved index finger and he says, "This." Billy wisecracks, "Your finger?" Ignoring the wisecrack, Curly says, "One thing. Just one thing. You stick to that and everything else doesn't mean nothing." Billy says, "That's great. But what's the one thing?" Curly says, "The nugget of wisdom. That's what you got to figure out." Now, I'm sure you didn't expect to learn from me today what the meaning of life is. It's always a very personal answer. I've told you a couple of stories, but your destiny enters in by a private door in every person's life. I don't have an answer for you. I just wanted to caress the question a little bit. And maybe over the coming days, you might ponder, what is your meaning in life? What was your destiny? Or what will it be if it's still ahead of you? I know a lot of people who say, well into their 70s, "I can't wait to find out what I'll be when I grow up." But if you look carefully and you ask the question earnestly, you may discover, what is the meaning of your life? Peace be with you.